This is Athens City Council, Tuesday, January 17th, 2012. This is a regular session of Athens City Council where we will read several ordinances, actually quite a few ordinances tonight, and pass some of them under suspension of the rules, I understand. So at the end of our agenda, we will have opportunities for citizens to speak. So, first of all, establishing a quorum. Obviously, all members are present, so we have a quorum. Communications, just quickly, I have a couple communications. We talked about the Ohio Municipal League offering some seminars for new council members. We've finally got some information. There are 3 different sessions. One will be in Dublin, one in Cincinnati, and one in Cleveland. So we think that probably the Dublin is the closest one. That occurs on Saturday, March 3rd. It's a 9 to 3. New council members, if any of you are interested, please talk to our secretary, Debbie Walker, as soon as possible. No fees involved for new members. We'll take care of that. Also, we did pass a resolution a while ago expressing our displeasure with the potential efforts to collect all municipal taxes in a centralized location. We have received 2 responses to our resolution. One is from the Ohio Department of Taxation, who, as you might suspect, think that that's a very good idea. And we also received one from our state representative, Debbie Phillips, who expresses interest in learning more about the potentials here. So that's the result of our resolution. Now we have communications from other elected officials. We'll begin with Mayor Weil.
Okay, so that's all from council, I assume?
That's all I have right now.
Okay. Just a couple of things. I think in your mailbox you should have gotten the Economic Development Council year report. Should be a green thing that's floating around in there. Business Remix, I think it says on the front. So that's their annual report, just to let you know what's going on. I want to let you know that I did appoint Nancy Bain to the Planning Commission. Harry Kanashigi's term expired the 15th of this month, and he said he wasn't willing to up for another 6 years because I think he's missing lunches and having a good time being retired. But again, I thank him for his work he was doing for about 21 years, I believe. So Nancy will be sitting in the next meeting. There is going to be a town hall meeting. We're scheduling it for February 7th, 6:30 to 8:30. It's coming up at the community center. This is our winter one, I guess, where we take input and anybody who has issues at least bring up, with the intention, of course, of addressing them sometime in June. I believe Claudia, the Human Resource Director, sent out an email about registering for public records training. Usually I think you kind of like delegate your clerk or council to actually go to attend it. It's one of these mandatory trainings that have to come up. And I think there's an email to it, and it's in Athens, I believe, coming up, I forget what, March sometime or other. And it's a limited about 40 spots, so if you want to jump in, do it quickly. If you have questions, either contact Debbie or Claudia. And that's pretty much all I have.
Auditor Kathy Hepp.
No report.
Law Director Patrick Lynn. No report, Mr. President. Okay, we will proceed then with ordinances for first reading. Ordinance 0112, an ordinance authorizing the Service Safety Director to submit an application and enter into contract with the Ohio Department of Transportation for safe routes to school funds, introduced by Councilmember Gosling.
Thank you, Mr. President. This ordinance would allow the mayor's office to enter into, to submit a grant application for a federal project that's run through the Ohio Department of Transportation. And this is something we've been very successful at receiving and been awarded for the 3 years in a row. We're hoping this will be our 4th year that we apply for this. Applications are due March 2nd, and these are for projects to encourage more walking and biking to public schools in the city. And we've done several projects, including raised intersection, increased signage, bike path spur, some public staircases that are going to be built in the next few months, I believe. And what else have we done? I guess that's most of the projects that we've worked on, as well as new sidewalks in the city. And so for this next round, project between $100,000 and $150,000 is likely. And the Bike and Pedestrian Subcommittee will be meeting Thursday at noon in the city building here, if anyone's interested in attending, to discuss potential projects that the city might submit an application for. And that's it.
Okay. Questions? Discussion? Okay. Ordinance 0212, an ordinance authorizing the Service Safety Director to enter into an LPA Federal Local Let project agreement with the Ohio Department of Transportation for Phase 2 of the Columbus Circle Drive Access Road and declaring an emergency.
Thank you. This second ordinance is for an infrastructure project on Columbus Road, Columbus Circle Drive. The city received around $400,000. I'm sorry. Do we need suspension on this time?
I'm not sure, but I think so.
Okay, well, I'll slow down a little bit. I would like to move that we consider ordinance 212 under suspension of the rules.
Second.
Okay. All of those members in favor of suspending the rules only, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Okay. Member Gosney?
And the purpose of the suspension is that we're approaching a deadline to get some of this work done for grant money that has been awarded to the city. So this is for Phase 2 of a two-part project off of Columbus Road. The first phase is done, and that was around $250,000. The second phase will be roughly $150,000 in grant funds, plus an additional appropriation of $97,000 from the Street Rehabilitation Fund in order to finish this project, which has allowed some economic development in the city.
So, what want to do?
And so I would like to move to adopt ordinance 212, first one of the year.
Second.
All those in favor of ordinance 0212 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
By same sign as opposed. Ordinance 212 is passed under suspension of rules then. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, ordinance 0312. An ordinance authorizing construction and construction engineering of the Columbus Circle Drive Access Road, Phase 2, Project 241.
Thank you, and this is the second part of that first ordinance. This ordinance is appropriating the funds for this project, $97,000 from the Street Rehabilitation Fund, and $148,734.39, which is grant money from our ARC grant fund, and also increasing our appropriations by those amounts to make sure they match.
Mayor Brown?
I think this, as a companion piece, should be suspended too, unfortunately. It doesn't have an emergency clause.
It does not have the emergency clause. But you think Andy needs this to
I was under the impression,
move
yes.
forward? Well, in that case,
Sorry.
thank you. I will move that we consider this ordinance under suspension of the rules.
Second.
All those in favor of suspending the rules on this ordinance, say aye.
Aye.
Against? Okay, Member Gosney?
And I apologize for not knowing that we need this under suspension tonight, but I move that we adopt ordinance 312.
Second.
All those in favor of adoption of ordinance 312 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign.
Did you have something?
Auditor Heck, you have something to say?
gonna say- Yeah, I was just going to say that this project and this money was in the works last year. This is nothing new. And council had appropriated this money last year for this project. We knew it was coming. We knew we were getting the grant money. But because of our end of our fiscal year and the way the auditors have asked us to track our grants, we asked Andy to unappropriate it and all of that. So it's not something that just came up. We're just reappropriating because of end of the year appropriations.
Thank you for that explanation.
Yeah, thank you.
Ordinance 0412, an ordinance authorizing the Surface Safety Director to enter into an LPA state project agreement with the Ohio Department of Transportation for scaling maintenance to rock face adjacent to US Route 33 near State Route 550 within the corporation boundary. Introduced by Member Gosnell.
Transportation Committee is busy this week. This ordinance is simply giving permission for the state of Ohio to come into Route 33 about 3/4 of a mile east of the 550 intersection to do some scaling on the rock cliffs there for stability and safety. And we don't need to pass this right away. This can go through our normal procedure.
Questions or comments about this? No? We'll move on to, I'm sorry.
Nothing. That's okay.
I'm sorry.
No, there's no emergency on this. There's no, as far as I know, they're just trying to stabilize the wall since it's a falling rock area and they just want to clean it up a little bit. I don't think they're putting anything like around Mount Rushmore on it or anything like that. So, although we should ask maybe.
Should only ask. Okay. Ordinance 0512, an ordinance authorizing the mayor of the city of Athens, Ohio, to enter into an agreement with the state of Ohio for an easement for a shared use path on property under the jurisdiction of the Ohio Department of Mental Health and declaring an emergency. Member Gosnell.
I would like to move that we consider this under suspension of the rules due to an effective date of January 1st, 2012 on this easement.
Second.
All those in favor of suspending the rules signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Member Gosnell.
This is simply an easement with the state of Ohio for a portion of the shared use path, or better known as the bike path in the city, near the mental health facility, Appalachian Behavioral Health Care. This is a 15-year agreement that allows that path to be maintained and to be continued on as a public use path.
Did you have anything to add?
And
Again, you can see this is for $1 from the street fund, TC 300s for a 15-year easement. Realize bike path is shared by the university, the city, and the mental health, state of Ohio Department of Mental Health, and the county. So it's, in this case, we're dealing with it.
And so, if there are not other comments, I'd like to move adoption.
Just one question. How big is the easement from the center? How far out does it go to the side?
I don't know offhand.
It's not very wide. It basically is between the Hawkins Conservancy area that the river goes through and the parking lot by the Appalachian Behavioral Health Care there, and they also
Right.
have a little bit of additional land with shrubs along
Right.
the edge there.
I just wondered, is that included in the easement, that little landscaping area, or is it just, we don't know?
I don't believe so.
Okay.
So Mayor Lyle, did you have anything else to add to that?
No. I'm not sure of the width either.
Okay. Member Gosnell.
It is described in quite some detail with, it's different portions of it, so it has a kind of a funny shape, and at some places it's 33 feet long, and so the width would be shorter than that in those places, but it's a very, it takes more than a page to describe it, so
Okay.
it's an odd shape along the river there. So I'd like to move adoption of ordinance 512.
Did we have a second?
Yes.
Okay. All those in favor of ordinance 512 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay. Ordinance 0512 is passed. Okay. Ordinance 612, an ordinance closing a portion of Court Street from Union to State on Saturday, May 19th, 2012, from 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. for the International Street Fair. Member Gosney.
And this is my last one tonight, I promise. This is ordinance, an annual ordinance that would close Court Street in preparation for the International Street Fair, which will be May 19th this year. This is a highly anticipated event. I think most of us enjoy in the community. Organized by the International Student and Faculty Services Office at the university. And this is the, we didn't mention this last week, but this is the 30-year anniversary. So this is a big one for the International Street Fair. So we hope it's as lively and exciting as it has been in previous years.
Thank you. Ordinance 712, an ordinance amending Athens City Code, Title 11, Business Regulations, to include Chapter 11.11, Sweepstakes/Internet Cafes, introduced by Councilmember Fall.
Thank you, President Sands. This is a follow-up on the zoning code changes that we made last year concerning sweepstake internet cafes. This relates directly to business regulations, and it's about 7 pages. So it's basically setting out the rules and requirements of having a business such as sweepstake or internet cafe within the city of Athens. I don't need any suspension or anything on this one.
Okay. So people who are interested in learning about this could get information from the clerk's office?
Yes.
Okay. And we will be reading it twice more.
Yeah.
Thank you, Member Fall. Ordinance 812, an ordinance authorizing ordering design, construction, and construction engineering of the North Court Infrastructure Improvements, Project 259, introduced by Councilmember Butler.
Thank you, Mr. President. This particular ordinance will authorize our City Service Safety Director to advertise, accept bids, sign contracts when necessary, and expend up to $432,000 for the design, construction, and construction engineering of the North Court Infrastructure Improvement Project. If you recall, we discussed this in committee last week. There is a very old sandstone storm tunnel underneath Court Street, and this is the primary focus of this project, is to replace that, as well as replacement or repair of 375 feet of storm line and then rebricking of North Court Street. There's also some additional sidewalk improvements that will be made on Court, Grosvenor, Franklin, East State, and Morris. Thank you.
Discussion? Ordinance 912, an ordinance declaring a real and present emergency, thus obviating the formal bidding procedure for repairs to the Carriage Hill Booster Station. Again, Member Butler.
Thank you, Mr. President. This particular ordinance authorizes the City Service Safety Director to expend up to $30,000 from the Water Fund 740 Transaction Class 500 to make repairs to the Carriage Hill Booster Station. And the mayor helped educate me on some of the needs and details regarding this. I may also point to him for more guidance. But essentially, this is an older station, and it boosts water up to Carriage Hill for increased flow and pressure to aid in any emergencies that would be necessary. Mayor.
Since it is obviously an emergency, could you suspend it, please?
I'm following Member Gosney's path tonight.
That's okay.
You're welcome. So, Sir President, at this moment I would like to backtrack and request that we suspend the rules for this particular ordinance, noting that, as the mayor pointed out, it is an emergency.
Thank you. All those in favor of suspending the rules only on...
Second. I'll second.
I'm sorry, thank you.
It's okay.
All those in favor of suspending the rules signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ordinance 912 will be considered under suspension of the rules.
Thank you, Mr. President. And then, at this moment, too, I would like to request that we pass this ordinance.
Second.
Okay. It has been moved and seconded that we accept ordinance 912. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Ordinance 1012, an ordinance authorizing the payment of a prior year expense and declaring an emergency. Member Nisbet.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I'll preface the next 4 or 5 ordinances with just an introduction saying that some of these have to do with obligations we made in a prior year or bills that we incurred in a prior year. So once again, we will be suspending the next series of ordinances, but just so you understand why that's happening. So, Mr. President, I move that we consider ordinance 1012 under suspension.
Second.
Okay. All those in favor of suspending the rules on ordinance 1012 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Same sign. Okay. The
Thank you,
rules have
Mr.
been suspended.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move adoption of ordinance 1012. Second. Okay. And this...
Go ahead.
And this particular ordinance authorizes the city to pay Caremark, which provides our prescription drug plan, and this was for a bill that was incurred for December of 2011, but the city did not receive the bill until January 11th, so that's why we have the ordinance now.
All those in favor of adoption of ordinance 1012 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Member Auditor.
I was just going to add so that council understands that this is actually only the first half of December. And so we do have another bill for the second half of December, although we would never have been paying that last year. This one, if we'd received it by the end of the year, which I think we usually do receive it by the end of the month, it was December 1st through 15th, we would have been paying that. So our monthly payments are more like $40,000 a month for our prescription drug coverage.
Okay. Moving on to ordinance 1112. An ordinance amending the 2012 appropriation ordinance and authorizing an interfund transfer. Member Nisbet.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that we consider ordinance 1112 under suspension.
Second.
All those in favor of suspending the rules on this ordinance, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It is suspended.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move adoption of ordinance 1112.
Second.
And this particular ordinance is for appropriating from our unappropriated balance $24,000. And these are for the Mulligan Road improvements, a loan payment. And the money is in the water fund. It exists. And so what we were doing is, as we make this payment, transferring this amount, the $24,000, from the water fund to the water debt fund.
All those wishing to adopt ordinance 1112 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, this ordinance is adopted. Moving on to ordinance 1212, an ordinance amending the 2012 appropriation ordinance. Again, Councilmember Nisley.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that we consider this under suspension.
Second.
All those in favor of suspending the rules on this ordinance signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. The rules are suspended.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move adoption of ordinance 1212.
Second.
And this particular ordinance has 2 sections to it, part of which was described by the auditor last week. Section 1 is going to have us transferring funds. The city of Athens has 55 funds, 3 of which we are making some transfers with to adjust the budget. The first transfer is for the House Arrest Fund 233, and the amount is $2,000. The second amount is for the Capital Improvements Fund. We previously had $500,000 in that. We are reducing that by $200,000 so that it will be $300,000 in capital improvements we'll be operating with this year. The last amount in Section 1 is for Issue 1 money, which we have talked about last week and again here tonight. And this is for the improvements to North Court Street. So what we are doing is making an allocation for $110,000 and decreasing the appropriations for that. Section 2 describes then amending the appropriations, and there are two amounts listed in that. $500 of which will be to the general fund fire, and that's to accept a donation from the Hocking Valley Bank for the fire, for purposes of the fire department. And then the other one is the $20,000 to the Internal Service Fund, and this is for a replacement server and remote backup and disaster recovery services for the auditor's office. And this is something that we learned of earlier this week. What happened is that the auditor's office has a server. It's essential. It's also required by law for us to have this backup, and what it does is provides an immediate nightly backup of all of our financial transactions for the city. That server stopped functioning this week, so the repairs are essential, or the purchase of a replacement server is essential for us. And those describe all the different amounts by which we're amending the ordinance.
Any questions about ordinance 1212? All those in favor of adoption of ordinance 1212 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. No opposition. Ordinance 1212 is adopted. Ordinance 1312, an ordinance amending the 2012 appropriation ordinance 0125-11 and ordinance 046-11, authorizing a contract with Perfection Group, Inc., and declaring an emergency. Introduced by Councilmember Nisley.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that we consider 1212 under suspension.
Second.
1312, I'm sorry.
1312.
All those in favor of suspending the rules on ordinance 1312?
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Thank you. The rules have been suspended on ordinance 1312.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move adoption of ordinance 1312.
Second.
And pardon my referring to some notes, but I want to get the explanation straight for this project. This was discussed last week in our Finance Committee meeting, and this is part of what's called the Perfection the Perfection Group project. And what we did was last year embarked on a project with them to make improvements to the code office, City Hall, the parking garage, and the rec center. And the original amount of that project was $425,700. Last week, you might recall that we were mentioning a $300,000 note that the city borrowed or brought up, and that was to help pay for that. So this particular ordinance, 1312, does two things. In Section 1, what we're doing is increasing the appropriation by $12,000. And you'll notice that Section 1 talks about the parking garage. And what's happened is that we, as we became involved with the Perfection Project, we realized that the lighting that was designed for our parking garage in order to make it safe and easy access for people, we realized that there need to be some improvements made to that. So we are going to attempt to do some of that work for those further improvements internally so that we can save some money, but at this point, this particular appropriation of $12,000 should take care of that. Section 2, which is a little more complicated, but I think I can explain it. Section 2 increases our authorization from that $425,700, the original amount of the project, to $450,947. And that increase in the authorization is for the $12,000 for the garage that I just mentioned in Section 1, and an additional $13,247 for the community center. And you might mention that we might remember that we also mentioned last week some of the details of the recreation center. As we were making those upgrades, we found that certain things were needed or additional improvements could be made to the project. One of which, if some of you use the fitness center in the morning, you might have noticed that there's a fan in that room that makes it tolerable, especially on hot days. And so that was one of the things that they're doing, is trying to do better air circulation in the community center, particularly in the fitness room. The other thing that will be happening is that for this amount of the $13,000 is that we will be able to set up a kiosk in the community center, which you will be able to see. Staff members will be the ones that will have access to it. And it will do two things. One, it's going to improve our communications with the city about different events that are going on. You might have noticed different things pasted on bulletin boards and things like that. We'll be able to communicate a little bit better about things going on at the community center. The other thing that that panel will enable us to do is to give access to the community center director to be able to remotely turn off lights. So if everybody goes home at the end of the evening and the skateboard lights and the tennis court lights are still on and they're burning away during the night, this will give him access so that somebody, a staff person, doesn't have to come in on overtime and they can be remotely signaled off. So those are the details for that particular ordinance. And I would just add one other comment that, and this is picking up on Councilmember Gosney and Councilmember Patterson's comments of last week, that we were asked, when will we see the improvements on these energy efficiency additions? And some of them will be more immediate, like the fan in the fitness room. But other things for us are going to take a period of time, and they may be as much as up to 8 to 10 years before we begin to recover some of the or see the savings, benefits on the cost. I think all of us on council, as well as the citizens, will be very interested to make sure that we get those details and report them back to you, the kind of savings that we begin to see with that.
And that was the point of entering into this contract, was to make things better, but also to save some money for the city for these various expenses. So you're right, we'll see this coming back over a longer period of time. Okay. Ordinance 1312, we have suspended the rules. We have a second for this, so could we just say all those in favor of adopting ordinance 1312 signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Okay. Ordinance 1312 is adopted. Ordinance 1412, an ordinance amending ordinance O-126-11, authorizing staffing levels, a non-union pay scale, and slotting for the fiscal year ending December 31st, 2012, and declaring an emergency. Member Nisley.
Thank you, Mr. President. I ask that we consider this under suspension of the rules.
Second.
Excuse me. We're asking approval to consider ordinance 1412 under suspension of the rules. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Thank you.
Rules are suspended.
Move adoption of 1412.
Second.
And this particular ordinance refers to slotting for non-union pay scales. Council members were provided with an Excel spreadsheet, which I believe may be also attached to some of your agendas. The two items that, for which this is under consideration, the two positions, one is an IT technician, and this is under the recommendation, I believe, of the auditors and the Human Resource Office at the City of Athens to move this from a range 1 and moving it up to range 2. And what this does is more appropriately puts it in the correct pay range for the responsibilities of this particular IT technical position. The second position that is listed in the Excel spreadsheet is for one that was it is the Assistant Recreation Director, and this is at the Community Center. There is an opening there, and this has been extensively reviewed by the Human Resources Director at the City of Athens, and the recommendation has been made for this particular position to be placed in a different range. And this is based on the management and supervisory responsibilities that this particular position has. And I might also mention that there is that this is for a vacant position at this point. There is a soft hiring freeze due to the budget constraints, but this is an existing position, and the assistant director position is critical for us to move our community center operations forward this year and to have the activities for families, for youth, and for adults in the community.
The rules have been suspended. Now we're up for adoption on ordinance 1412. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Ordinance 1412 is adopted. Ordinance 1512, an ordinance providing for the issuance of $270,000 of notes by the City of Athens, Ohio, in anticipation of the issue of bonds for the purpose of renewing notes issued for the purpose of paying part of the cost of acquiring and installing energy conservation improvements at the city's community center and declaring an emergency. Member Nisley.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that we consider this under suspension of the rules.
We don't need a suspension on this.
Oh, we don't?
It's due March 8th. We might on
Okay.
2nd, but I think
Okay.
we're okay.
Okay, that's fine, then I'll just withdraw.
I know all these
Suspension.
financial ones, we're usually in a hurry to get those in place, but this one can wait at least a couple weeks.
Okay.
One comment I wanted to make on this, though, is that our new interest rate, we borrowed this money a year ago, our interest rate last year was 0.7%, and it is now going to be rolled over at 0.45%.
That's great. Thank you.
Almost free.
That is. And this is for what I mentioned earlier, the perfection, the energy improvements, and that was now revised to about a $450,000 project. The city did take out a $300,000 note, or a note was issued, and that payment does come due in March, as the auditor mentioned. And so we, under the auditor's recommendation, are paying off $30,000 of that note, and so issuing this $270,000 for the remainder of the balance on the note for that project.
Thank you, Member Nisley. Announcements and other business. Announcements such as committees that might want to have meetings next week.
Planning and development.
Planning and Development.
Transportation, we may have a visitor from Ohio Brew Week, and also some easement discussion.
Okay. Member Nisley.
Finance.
Finance. And Member Butler.
I'm not sure, yeah, I need to
We'll
check
put
in
you
with the
down
city.
for something.
Okay, for city service safety needs.
Okay, thank you. We have other business. Council members? Administration? No? And so now we have an opportunity for citizens to speak on legislative news and city services not covered on the agenda. Before we start, I just want to say that some of you may have come expecting a resolution to be on this agenda. There's been discussion among council members and myself, and we think probably, this resolution should not have come forth from the Planning and Development Committee, but maybe a committee of the whole. So we will be holding a committee of the whole to discuss this resolution next week at committee meetings, regular committee meetings. So that's why it's off the agenda now. We will discuss it next week, and then at the very next full council meeting, which is the first one in February, we will be taking a vote on that. Those are our plans. Okay, now, I'm sorry, opportunities need to come up, state your name, your address, and tell us what you want to say.
Thank you. Abe Olisoff, P.O. Box 2323, Athens, Ohio. I'd like to thank you guys for giving me the time to speak again. I want to talk about water fluoridation, reiteration of last council meeting. We have this hexafluorosilicic acid is what's being administered in the water, and it's costing us about $20,000 a year just for the chemical. Not to mention the corrosion it may be causing to the piping and the machinery that administrates it. I'm sure Crystal Kennard down at the water treatment plant would be willing to show you guys the corrosion. I would advise all of you to please look at it, because it's not only a sign of what is coming out of our wallet to pay for this, but what is going into our body. I can't quote the exact article today. I'm sure one of my other people that are speaking tonight can mention that, but there was a science magazine that just came out showing that sodium fluoride was causing arterial cirrhosis, which is leading to brittling of the arteries, which could be causing heart attack. But at the minimum, it's costing us a lot of money to put it in the water, and there are potential health risks. It was put in the 50s in other places and in 99 with good intentions, but there has been new science since then that may challenge that. And I have spoken to a Dr. David Ball in Chillicothe, a dentist, and he is willing to come and speak to Athens City Council about the negative health effects of sodium fluoride. I spoke to him, and he said he'd be willing to come and give you guys a presentation on whatever questions you may or may have. So if you'd like to get in contact with me, and I can set up maybe something where you guys can meet Dr. David Ball, the dentist from Chillicothe. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Somebody else? Sir?
My name is Ron Luce. I'm with the Athens County Historical Society, 65 North Court Street, and I would like to address the council in that I think that as citizens and as leaders, we have a responsibility to right egregious wrongs that occur within our city's government. This past week, the Planning Commission passed a very, in my opinion, very foolish decision, which bypasses all B3 planning zones and says essentially that parking spaces are now businesses. I find that outrageous. I find it outrageous that I cannot get any relief that when one portion of the city does something egregiously wrong, and there are people sitting on this board who know that it's wrong, and there are many people sitting in this room, you have a responsibility to speak out. I would highly recommend that you have the courage, some of you, have the courage to pass or to put forth a resolution condemning this ridiculous, foolish action on the part of the Planning Commission this past Wednesday. Thank you.
Sir?
I'm Dane Waller, and I live at 155 Morris Avenue. And I'm also here about the issue of water fluoridation. This is, I think, my third time here. Still, I also sent the old council an email, I heard no response. Still have heard no response. I mean, it's a serious public health concern to me that all of us in Athens County are drinking fluoridated water, and the science come out over the past 20 years showing that this is a fraud, it's bad for our bodies, especially young children. Children are getting hit the worst by this, and it's just horrible that nothing's being done about it. And what Abe was saying is just today, I found this, it was released in the month of January, to study from the Nuclear Medicine Communications Medical Journal, and I'll just read the brief abstract results here for you. Significant correlation between fluoride uptake and calcification was observed in most of the arterial walls, except in those of the abdominal aorta. Fluoride uptake in coronary arteries was demonstrated in 46% of the patients, and coronary calcifications were observed in 56% of the patients. There was significant correlation between history of cardiovascular events and presence of fluoride uptake in coronary arteries. The coronary fluoride uptake value in patients with the cardiovascular events was significantly higher than in patients without cardiovascular events. And then in the conclusion, these scientists have written, an increased fluoride uptake in coronary arteries may be associated with an increased cardiovascular risk. So again, it comes back to, if there's science saying that this, even a chance of this having a problem with the human body, why is it in our water? Why aren't things like vitamin C or vitamin D in our water that actually are proven to help? I mean, it was fraud science by chemical corporations, and it's still being practiced today. And to end, I'd like to read risks and safety phrases for the new members here. For the hexafluorosilicate molecule, or sodium fluoride, which is being put in our water. Toxic if swallowed. Contact with acid liberates very toxic gas. Irritating to skin and eyes. Keep locked up and out of reach of children. Do not breathe the dust. Wear suitable protective clothing. In case of an accident or if you're feeling well, seek medical advice immediately and show the label whenever possible. Once again, I'll be back in 2 weeks with another study. Please, council members, I'm urging an ordinance, something, just get this chemical out of our water. Thank you.
Greg Broadhurst, 14 Granville, west side of Athens. As a person who's just had a valve replacement due to calcification, I can speak to this. I filter my water, but not with a filter that's good enough to get rid of the fluoride. Now, as you may or may not know, the additive to our water does not come from a pharmaceutical company, it comes from a fertilizer plant. And so, except for my exposure to Agent Orange, the only other possibility for me to have gone through this, I've lived here for 30 years, is as such as the gentleman just spoke about. So we need to take a scientific look at this, because I just had a video the other day that came to me through a source, and I can't remember what it was. That's what happens when you get calcification. And it's not funny, because it takes a little time to, get the memory banks back. But the thing is, we need to do something about this based upon scientific studies. I don't know how many countries in Europe ban this additive, because it's not a medicine. Or maybe it is a medicine. It's not even a medicine. It's just like, it's a side product of fertilizer production. Research it anywhere. It is not a pharmaceutical. So what the heck is it doing in our water? Why do I have to compound Agent Orange with this crap? Not to be real, and hope to have any recovery whatsoever unless I have like a $3,000 filtration system which takes it out of the water so I can utilize it. That's all I have to say. Thanks.
Sir?
Dr. Bill Ellis, sir. I wish I could express the emotions I really feel about this, but I won't. I'll try to be gentle. I want to start with 1939 when there was a public health official. His name was Dr. H. Howard Dean, and he was in charge of the public service there from 1939 on, and he had some problems. The people at this time, what he was examining, were having mottled teeth, specks, white specks appearing on the teeth. Well, Dr. Dean was pretty sharp about that. He said those were just beauty marks, which of course they were not. They were external signs of internal damage. And what happens eventually, these beauty marks will pit through the enamel and get to the dentine, the structural component of the tooth. So that was where that stood. So Dr. Dean really didn't have an explanation for what was happening, but he did set up experiments to see whether or not the fluoride was topical or inherent within the body. But we know now that fluoride is both. It can affect inside the body and it will affect the body topically. So the teeth, when fluoride is first introduced into the tooth, into the body cavity, the chemical structure of the teeth are given, the chemical structure is hydroxyapatite. Well, after a while, when the fluoride gets going, the chemical structure changes to fluorapatite. Notice the fluoride being replaced by the hydroxyl ion. And that was a pretty, they didn't pay much attention to that. They thought that may have been advantageous because the fluorapatite turned out to be very hard. It was hard to drill through. The only problem was it was brittle, and the tooth would collapse. So that turned out to be a good idea. So I won't say any more about that. There's a lot of also one other thing I want to say is that the hydrofluorosilicic acid is what is packaged in these nice aluminum containers and sent throughout the country to all the water distributors throughout the country. Hydrofluorosilicic acid is a deadly poison. It's carcinogenic and it's a deadly poison. Why the hell are they doing that to us? That's all I want to say.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
My name is Lois Whaley, and I live at 14 Oak Street in Athens. And I want to put a little historic perspective on what we've been hearing about fluoride. 40 years ago, more than 40 years ago, because we've lived here since 1964, this question came up before City Council about fluoridation of the water. At the time, my dentist and I, that was Dr. Kuckler, who's now retired, were in favor of fluoridation. And there were a number of people locally who were opposed to it. One of the reasons we were in favor of it was that there had been notice earlier, about 1945 or thereabouts, that places that had natural fluoridation in the water, that is to say the fluoride came in the wells naturally, that the teeth were stronger and there was less caries, less that sort of problem. So there was this movement to add fluoride to water that did not have it naturally. Immediately, almost, it seemed that this became part of a communist plot. During the 1950s, fluoridation was considered a communist plot that would soften the brain. I don't remember hearing anything about hardening of the arteries, but it was sort of a softening of the brain was expected to occur, which would make it easier for the communists to take over in this country. Now, most of you are too young to remember this kind of, and certainly today, the people who have spoken already are young people who have an interest in science and so on, and have some scientific information, and I'm sure that We will soon hear from another person who is opposed to fluoridation, because I've heard him speak on that subject. But I think that we should be a little cautious about, as a matter of fact, for a very long time, Athens did not have fluoride in the water. In fact, I believe there were probably 2 elections at which it was turned down. However, in the meantime, many places within Athens County naturally fluoridated the water. I mean, not naturally, but put fluoride in the public water because of the dental health concerns, especially for children.
Mrs. Whalen.
And
Mrs.
I want
Whalen.
to mention just...
Excuse me, Ms. Wade, time is up, so if
Okay.
you take a couple seconds and wind it up,
Right.
please.
My grandson grew up out in Berkeley where they had fluoride in the water. His parents were a little bit concerned about that, and so they had bottled water. Well, we had to spend about $600 on that child's dental problems because he had been, I think, because he had been having unfluoridated water for all those years. Thank you.
Thank you. Gentleman on the end. Yes, yes.
Hi, I'm Dane McCarthy, and I live at 9930 Montserrat Road in Athens County. And yes, people did used to think it was a communist plot. But the reality is that the naturally occurring fluoride is calcium fluoride. What is used as an overarching term for the chemical which is being added to the water is sodium fluoride. Fluoride is an overarching sort of general name for a whole family of chemicals, okay? What is actually being put in the water is hydrofluorosilicic acid, which is a byproduct of fertilizer. It is also got a lot of trace poisons, heavy metals in it, which it's packaged up to get rid of it because they don't know, it would cost them money to dispose of this poison. So they decided to put it in the water. And the reason why this is important is it's not only a health issue, but it's an issue of awareness. What we're looking at in the world today is a group of very wealthy, very powerful men who really, their only loyalty is to their investors. These are corporate people. Their investors are number one. They do not care about you. They do not care about me. They do not care about our health. And the government has been taken over by these corporate entities. The government and the corporations are now one and the same. So anyone who thinks that the government will try, now sometimes some of these things maybe are helpful, but in this particular case, and many, many other cases, the government does not have your best interests at heart. Their loyalty, their concern is the welfare of their stockholders, the investors, the wealthy investors, a very small percentage, perhaps 0.1% of the population of the planet at most. So we're looking at a health crisis in this country. People wonder why we have problems with not just our teeth, but early onset of Alzheimer's. I mean, where is that coming from? And a host of other diseases which are extremely rare. Autoimmune diseases. We're getting an avalanche from all different directions of toxins. This is only one example that we're seeing and we're trying to take care of. But this is like the little opening that you go through. If you can go through this and you can go down the rabbit hole, you will never be the same. You will understand that the world that we're being fed to us on a daily basis is not necessarily the reality. Karl Rove bragged that we create reality. And as anyone who understands Washington knows, perception in Washington is reality. So I just wanted to have all of you who saw the DVDs that we passed out 2 weeks ago about water fluoridation, the dangers, please raise your hand. Okay, one person out of all of them. That gives us an idea of the level of concern about the health of the population of Athens from Athens City Council. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Anastasia Chambers. I live at 11 Forest Street in Athens, Ohio. I also have the belief that fluoride is very dangerous for our health, but whether or not you agree with me, it still comes down to, by putting fluoride in our water, it is mass medication without consent. I don't want to drink fluoride, and to avoid it, I have to go buy bottled water rather than be able to use the water from my tap. Whether or not you agree that it's bad, you still have to know that you are putting chemicals in the water that we all are supposed to drink. We either drink it from the faucet or we have to go buy bottled water. And that, to me, is an extreme annoyance, a large concern that whether or not you agree with our medical concerns, you still think it's okay to put it in our water, even though the advantages to it are medical advantages. And it's not with our consent. There are people here who don't want it in the water. Yes, there was a vote years and years ago, but clearly it's a new issue that needs to be brought back up again, and it's very bothersome that people aren't taking it seriously. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Sir?
My name is John Howell, and I live at 7745 Clark's Chapel Road. And I'm here in anticipation of the discussion of the resolution that Councilman Jeff Reisner introduced at the last meeting. And I'm here representing a group called Democracy Over Corporations, it's abbreviated DOC, so I will refer to it as DOC. Okay. DOC was formed in September 2010 in response to the Citizens United decision by the Supreme Court giving free speech to corporations. Our purpose was to educate ourselves about the relationship between corporations and democracy, and to educate the public about this issue, and to work toward the reversal of that Citizens United decision. DOC is nonpartisan. It's not affiliated with any party, political party, nor will it be. It is affiliated with a national movement called Move to Amend. There are 154 people on our mailing list because they've asked to be on our mailing list, because nobody gets on it without asking. We have garnered 297 signatures of people favoring a constitutional amendment to eliminate corporate personhood. 184 of those have Athens addresses. We've gotten those at the farmers market, typically, for the most part. The major question, of course, is the issue of corporate personhood an appropriate issue for the city to undertake? Does it matter to the city of Athens? And I would just briefly reiterate Councilman Reisner's argument that corporations armed with the free speech protection of the Constitution can overwhelm local elections with advertising if they choose to do so because of their deep pockets. Negative advertising is unfortunately very effective, and corporations, often through PACs and super PACs, have used them extensively. Why is this a local issue? Because, as Associate Justice Stephen Breyer has pointed out in his book, Making Democracy Work, we, the people in this country, in contrast to preceding European systems, delegate to the central government the power it has. As James Madison said, the Constitution is a charter granted by liberty, not a charter of liberty granted by power. This local approach, in which people are the source of power, Justice Breyer goes on to say, assures that state and local officials have broader decision-making power, simultaneously placing greater power in the hands of those who elect those officials. If we, the people, have over the decades ceded control of government to unelected corporate executives, as this gentleman referred to, it is time to take it back. It is time for local officials to take it back in order to be able to fulfill their duty to protect the people they represent from corporate plunder of natural and human resources that threaten access to clean air, water, and health. it will be difficult for that to happen when corporate free speech can dominate elections and corporate criminal activity can be hidden behind the protection of the Fourth and Fifth Amendments. As was pointed out in a recent article by David Swanson, cities are passing initiatives and resolutions demanding an end to corporate personhood. Localities are restricting corporate rights. State legislatures, almost done, very close to being done, are considering throwing their support behind the movement. State courts are in some cases already there. Books are being published, forums held, and so on. Events are planned in over 400 cities and towns for this Friday and Saturday, the second anniversary of the Citizen decision. We urge the City Council become part of this resurgence of democracy, a resurgence that gives some glimmer of hope in these difficult times. 5 men in black robes in Washington should not be able to overrule the will of the people. Thank you.
Bill Sofranik, 34 Grosvenor Street. As all of you consider this resolution next week, two things to keep in your minds, if you will. Constitutional rights, at their core, they're human rights. It just makes no sense that corporations, a creation of government, should have rights which essentially at their core belong, which are human rights and belong to people. It's just bizarre. It's absolutely bizarre. Equally bizarre is the way in which corporations obtained constitutional rights. They did not always have constitutional rights. Early in our history, in this country, they had no corporations. There was a suspicion of corporations. They were tightly controlled. Now, I think most of the members of council have had the opportunity to read either On Equal Protection by Tom Hartman or Gangs of America by Ted Nance. And it's clear from those books that there was a suspicion of corporations, not to be equated, let's be clear, not to be equated with suspicion with a business, not at all. But the suspicion of corporations was great. They were tightly controlled. They certainly did not have constitutional rights. Now this changed in the 1880s, the robber baron era, or at least that robber baron era, and with the decision of Santa Clara County versus the Southern Pacific Railroad. It's a bizarre story. How corporations got constitutional rights is a bizarre story, and the fact that they have constitutional rights is bizarre. Keep those things in mind, if you would, when you debate and mull over the resolutions that's been proposed. Thank you.
My name is Susan Riggy, 28 Graham Drive in Athens. And I came here in support of Councilman Reisner's resolution regarding having the city come out in support of a move to amend the Constitution to remove the concept of corporate personhood and corporate human rights. But I find it extremely interesting that this is kind of on the back of this fluoride discussion, which I had no idea was going to happen today. And there's a couple of sort of links I want to try and make for council regarding this. I had been given to understood that there was some concern on the parts of some council members about whether this was an appropriate issue for the city to take up. And I think this fluoride discussion is really a good example of yes, it is, because democracy is a local issue. And if democracy does not exist locally, it's not going to exist nationally or any other way. I'm a physician, and I know there's a lot of controversy about fluoride, and there has been for decades. Sorry, I'm getting nervous. But I'm kind of appalled that our city council, from what I'm hearing, the emotion that people bring, and they say that they've come more than once, and they're prepared to come again. And I know we're all busy, and I wouldn't have necessarily had a chance to watch the CD if it was just like in 2 weeks. But the fact that only one person did makes me nervous that council's not listening to their constituents. So I think on the fluoride issue, you owe all these people who are expressing concern the respect of doing something about it. Either surveying the local dentists, putting together some kind of task force. I think you owe it to the people who you represent to try and deal with this issue that is not just an isolated individual here or there, is what I'm hearing. But in terms of the broader issue, the first gentleman who spoke said it much more completely and eloquently, but in order for us to have power in a democracy, we have to be able to reach our elected people, and you are the people that we can most easily reach. And so we're asking you to take this issue forward for us, to the state level so it can be taken to the national level, and so we can get some movement on it. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Thank you. I'm Dick McGinn, 44 Graham Drive in Athens. I'm going to use my time to read a poem. I'm actually a member with John Howell and a number of others of the Democracy Over Corporations. I've been working at the Athens Farmers Market to collect signatures, and you meet a lot of interesting people in Athens. And one day last August, a lady came to the booth, asked about what we were doing. We said, well, corporations are not people. She says, well, isn't that obvious? Well, the fact is it's not obvious. It's one of those crazy things. Bill mentioned earlier that it was absurd or that it was bizarre. It's one of those things in our laws, in our system of laws, that has been buried. Most people don't know about it, but in fact corporations have assumed First Amendment rights, Second Amendment rights, Fifth Amendment rights, 14th Amendment rights, and the interesting thing is that the lower courts deny these. Corporations are not people, my friend. But the Supreme Court, they have enough money to appeal and appeal and appeal. By the time it gets to the Supreme Court, then the five men in robes overturn laws that are designed by the government to protect the people. The Supreme Court says, no, the government is interfering. Now we turn over all the laws. We turn over the McCain-Feingold law and the rest of it, as we know from the Citizens United. Well, to get to my poem, the lady that came up was Patricia Black, a local poet who's becoming more and more well-known, both in the state and also nationally. She wrote a poem after signing our petition, and here's the poem. This is in the spirit of Stephen Colbert, who said famously that if corporations are people, Mitt Romney is a serial killer because he's been buying up corporations and killing off the ones that are not profitable and consolidating. This is in the spirit of the, at least 100 sayings are going around now on the internet. One of them is that if corporations are people, Texas will execute one, or something like that. Okay, here's her poem. I met a corporation, and because I had a hunch it had been adjudged a person, I invited it to lunch. Oh, that naughty corporation. As far as I could see, it had not been taught its manners. I got no R, S, V, or P. But since I was the hostess, I had duties to perform, though this corporation person was well outside the norm. So making up the place cards put my thinking to a test. Should I just write general and forget about the rest? And incorporated is too long, and so what do you think? Would it seem uncouth of me if all I wrote was ink? Then again, there's gender. To complicate my tale, is corporation female or is corporation male? Somehow it seems that neither is appropriate or will fit, but it goes against my training to call a corporation it. Well, I had invited it, so I assigned it to a seat. Now I had a problem. What do corporations eat? Was it carnivore or vegan? Lactose intolerant? Some persons can eat seafood, while other persons can't. There were peanuts to consider, and corn syrup issues too. If I fed this so-called person eggs, would it suddenly turn blue? What a jolt at lunchtime when the corporation knocked. When the door was opened, I was shocked, I tell you, shocked. I'm used to thinking person as my neighbor or my dad, but was sorely disabused of all such thoughts I might have had. There were janitors, clerks, and typists, lawyers up to you-know-where, receptionists and file clerks, and scientists to spare. There were CEOs and CFOs and all sorts of other O's. How this person would fit my dining room, the Supreme Court only knows. Patricia L.H. Black, Rock Riffle Road, Athens. I forgot to mention the title of the poem, What's Wrong with This Picture? Thank you very much.
Mr. McGinn. We will Patricia Black into that time period here. Do we have other people that would like to speak tonight? Oh, sir.
Yes, I was not going to speak, but that last poem has inspired me. Now, I have studied Spanish history, Italian history, and French history. I've studied English history. The word INC, or the jargon INC, is an American coined word. In England, it's LDT, the Limited Liability Act. Now, in the Latin countries, that means France, Italy, and Spain, it's called SA, an anonymous society. You can't have an anonymous society at lunch. 3 cheers for Black.
Anybody else wish to speak tonight? Okay. Oh, one more, okay.
My name is Alyssa Bernstein. I live at 19 Fairview Avenue here in Athens. I also did not prepare to speak. I came to hear the reading of Councilman Reisner's resolution. In fact, I read it in advance. I support it strongly. I support the work of the Democracy Over Corporations group, and I endorse everything that John Howell said in support of this resolution, which I hope that the Athens City Council will pass. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Chuck Overby. I live here in Athens, on Angel Ridge Road, and I'm a retired engineering professor at this university. And in 1977-78, I spent a sabbatical leave in the United States Congress, working in an office called the Office of Technology Assessment. My project was to study the immensity of resource consumption by the United States of America and its consequences, which today we talk about global warming and resource wars as the resources get more scarce all over this planet. Now, when I was in the Congress, working intimately with many of the committees in the Congress with respect to these issues, I learned precisely how corporations buy their way into government. And I simply want to share with you my support for this resolution that Jeffrey is going to introduce, was supposed to introduce this evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Go ahead.
June Safranik, 34 Grosvenor Street, and I'd just like to say if you go to dianeream.com or .org, that you can hook up with the podcast today of her radio show where they discussed corporations as personhood, and it's 51 minutes.
Thank you. Okay. Anybody else? Okay. We're going to call this evening's meeting adjourned. We're not, I'm sorry. It's 8:54. We do have a collective, we have an executive session regarding collective bargaining, for which we need to clear the room. So we'll give you 10 minutes to...
Need a motion in a second.
Okay.
Okay.
I forget about all that stuff. Okay.
We need a motion in a second.
I move we go into executive session to include all members of the council, the mayor, and the auditor. Second. For the purpose of collective bargaining discussion.
Thank you.
Aye. Aye. Yeah, we need to vote. Aye.
Aye.
My back hurts. Aye.
Aye.
Now we're...